The early 1800s, when Europe was busy throwing revolutions around like confetti. Meanwhile, Greece was stuck under Ottoman rule, which, spoiler alert, was not exactly a dream vacation. Picture it. The Ottomans had a massive empire, a terrifying fleet, and enough resources to stage their own version of Pirates of the Aegean. Greece? Well, Greece had a lot of passionate people, some very old boats, and a burning desire to tell the Ottomans, "We're over it." But here's the problem. Greece's navy was, let's call it, vintage. The Ottomans had giant warships bristling with cannons, while the Greeks had fishing boats, a few yachts, and maybe some rafts they found lying around. It's like coming to a tank fight armed with a water pistol and a dream. The odds? Not great. The Greeks needed a plan, a clever, daring, probably insane plan. And boy, did they deliver. Enter the Greek War for Independence, a classic David versus Goliath story, but with more fire and fewer slingshots. The war kicked off in 1821, and right away the Greeks realized they were severely outmatched at sea. "What do we do?" someone probably asked during an emergency meeting. I mean, we could just set the enemy ships on fire? And thus, the idea of the fire ship, a floating Molotov cocktail, was born. Revolutionary times call for revolutionary ideas, even if those ideas sound like they came from a pyromaniac's diary. Now, let's not sugarcoat it. Fire ships were basically kamikaze missions. The plan was simple. Take an old disposable ship, thus fill it with explosives and flammable stuff, light it up, and steer it into an Ottoman warship. Boom. Problem solved, assuming you didn't blow yourself up in the process. Oh, and did I mention the part where someone had to volunteer to steer these floating bonfires? Because apparently job safety wasn't a thing back then. To make it even crazier, the Greeks didn't have a lot of experience in naval warfare. They were mostly merchants and fishermen who suddenly found themselves trying to outsmart one of the most powerful navies in the world. "We're not just sailors," one Greek captain might have said. "We're creative sailors." And by creative, they meant willing to set everything on fire. So there you have it. Greece in 1821. A nation with no real navy, no resources, and no chill. Their enemies had all the firepower, but the Greeks had something even better. Sheer audacity. Would their fiery new tactic actually work? Stay tuned, because things are about to get lit. Literally. So, how do you even come up with the idea of turning your boats into floating bonfires of doom? Well, it turns out desperation is a fantastic muse. The Greek rebels, staring down the Ottoman navy, a fleet so huge it probably had its own zip code, thought, "You know what we have? A bunch of old rickety ships no one wants. You know what we don't have? Boundaries." And thus the fire ship was born. Here's the plan. Take a ship that's about one strong gust of wind away from collapsing, fill it with gunpowder, tar, and whatever else goes boom, and then set the whole thing on fire just before ramming it into an Ottoman warship. Simple, right? Wrong. Because step one was finding a volunteer to sail what was essentially a floating Molotov cocktail into enemy territory. "Oh, you'll totally survive," they probably said. "Just jump off at the last second." Easy peasy. Spoiler, it was not easy peasy. The first volunteers were, let's just say, highly motivated. Picture a Greek sailor like Demetrios who's halfway through a barrel of wine and says, "Sure, I'll pilot a fireball. What could go wrong?" Answer, everything. Turns out sailing a burning ship is kind of tricky. Early attempts often ended with Greek sailors accidentally roasting themselves, or the fire fizzling out before the ship even reached the enemy. Not exactly the stuff of naval glory, but after some trial and literal error, they figured it out. First, add a long fuse so you don't burst into flames immediately. Second, practice your jump off the burning death machine technique. And third, aim better. One poor guy missed the Ottoman fleet entirely and just drifted off into the horizon. Imagine the awkward silence as he floated by, waving sheepishly. Despite the hiccups, the fire ship strategy caught on. Why? Because when it worked, it was spectacular. Ottoman sailors would see a flaming ship barreling toward them and panic. Is that normal? Should it be on fire? Cue chaos as everyone tried to abandon ship while not catching on fire themselves. Turns out having your boat set ablaze by a flaming Greek death trap really ruins your day. So picture this. It's 1821. The Ottoman Navy is chilling in their fancy ships, probably sipping tea and congratulating themselves on being the biggest maritime bullies in the Mediterranean. Enter the Greeks, who, instead of building a bigger navy like normal people, decided, hey, what if we just set everything on fire? Bold strategy. Questionable for insurance purposes, but bold. The Greek fire ships were basically the ancient equivalent of, if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. They'd load up old boats with flammable goodies, tar, sulfur, oil, probably some guy's leftover souvlaki, and then light it up. One volunteer, red poor soul with questionable life choices, would steer the flaming boat straight into an Ottoman ship, jump off at the last possible second, and hope the whole thing didn't explode prematurely. You know, just a casual day at work. One of the most iconic fire ship attacks happened at the Battle of Eressos in 1821. A Greek captain named Demetrios Papanikolis decided to introduce the Ottomans to his fiery new invention. Imagine the Ottoman sailors' confusion as they see this flaming death raft barreling toward them. Captain, I think that ship's on fire. Wait, is it coming? At us? Spoiler alert, yes it was. Papanikolis successfully torched an Ottoman brig, and the shockwave was felt across the entire fleet. The Ottomans, understandably, were not thrilled about their new barbecue-themed naval experience. But not every fire ship mission went smoothly. Sometimes the wind changed direction, and the Greeks accidentally set their own ships on fire. Whoops! Other times the Ottomans saw the flaming float of doom coming and just moved out of the way. Turns out steering a burning ship isn't exactly an exact science. Still, when it worked, it really worked. The Ottomans started seeing fire ships in their nightmares. Sailors reportedly refused to sleep below deck in case they had to abandon ship in a hurry. One Ottoman commander probably summed it up best when he shouted, "Why are these Greeks like this?" So, what happened after the Greeks turned their boats into floating bonfires? Well, the Ottomans learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a nation armed with too much passion and way too much flammable material. The fire ship strategy didn't just burn their ships, it also set their morale ablaze. Ottoman sailors started seeing Greek boats and immediately developed a sudden, urgent need to be literally anywhere else. Oh, look, another flaming death canoe. Time to rethink my career choices, we imagine them saying while paddling away frantically. Historically speaking, the fire ships were a game changer. The Greeks managed to destroy dozens of Ottoman vessels, which, let's face it, is a solid day's work for a bunch of folks who were basically winging it with fire and hope. This wasn't just about sinking ships, though. It was about making a statement. The Greeks were shouting, yeah, we might be outnumbered, outgunned, and outbudgeted, but we've got enough guts and pyromania to make it work. And it worked. The success of the fire ships helped turn the tide in the Greek War of Independence. By 1827, with a little help from European allies like Britain, France, and Russia, who probably joined in after realizing, wow, these guys are really serious about freedom and arson, Greece was well on its way to independence. The Ottomans, meanwhile, were left scratching their heads and trying to figure out how to untoast their navy. But the legacy of the fire ships didn't stop there. Their daring tactics inspired future naval warfare strategies. Sure, today's navies have swapped out flaming boats for, missiles and submarines, but the principle remains the same. Sometimes the best defense is an offense that makes your enemies go, wait, they're doing what now? So, what's the moral of the story here? If you're ever up against impossible odds, just remember the Greeks of 1821. When life gives you lemons, set them on fire, strap them to a boat, and sail them straight into your problems. And if anyone asks why, just smile and say, it's called innovation, my